From Washington, I'm David Schuster in for Keith Olbermann. She was for Alaska's bridge to nowhere before she was against it. She had to pay for her own vetting to be the Republican vice presidential nominee, except, of course, she didn't. And she opposed aerial wolf hunting, unless you count the fact that she introduced the bill making it easier to gun down defenseless wolves from airplanes in the last frontier state. Our fifth story in the countdown, the lies of Sarah Palin are too numerous to cover in a single hour. Her latest falsehood, however, is so outrageous it needs to be added to the list. She implied that President Obama might not be a natural-born citizen of the United States, then denied the very same day that she had ever done so. Put another way, she can see Kenya from her house. Governor Palin has joined the ranks of the birthers, telling a right-wing radio host that the conspiracy theorists are correct to question the citizenship of the president. She even seemed to suggest that the McCain campaign should have raised it as an issue during the 2008 campaign.
Would you make the birth certificate an issue if you ran?
I think the public rightfully is still making it an issue. I don't have a problem with that. I don't know if I would have to bother to make it an issue because I think enough members of the electorate still want answers.
Do you think it's a fair question to be looking at?
I think it's a fair question, just like I think past associations and past voting records, all of that is fair game. I got to tell you, too, I think our campaign, the McCain-Palin campaign, didn't do a good enough job in that area. We didn't call out Obama and some of his associates on their records and what their beliefs were and perhaps what their future plans were.
By nightfall, on her Facebook page, where else, Governor Palin tried to put the toothpaste back into the tube. First, by claiming that the issue is fair game solely because people have questioned whether her son Trig is her own child. Then by denying that she'd even said it. Quote, stupid conspiracies. Voters have every right to ask candidates for information if they so choose. I've pointed out that it was seemingly fair game during the 2008 election for many on the left to badger my doctor and lawyer for proof that Trig is in fact my child. Conspiracy-minded reporters and voters had a right to ask, which they have repeatedly, but at no point, not during the campaign and not during recent interviews, have I asked the president to produce his birth certificate or suggested that he was not born in the United States. Joining us now is MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff. He is also senior strategist at Public Strategies and author of Renegade, The Making of a President. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, David.
Governor Palin says that because her son is fair game, questioning President Obama's citizenship is fair game, even though it was never the Obama campaign that targeted her kids. Even though she complains at every turn about the people she calls Trig truthers. Is she trying to have it both ways?
Can we count the number of ways she's trying to have it here? I think there is a nice insight here into the thinking of Sarah Palin here. First of all, this concept of fair game. The idea that it is a game or there's some fairness. It's kind of an immature way to look at politics and campaign interchanges. It's not actually equivalent to raise questions about citizenship compared to voting records. So it's not the questions being asked that makes it similar. There's no equivalence just because one set of stories involves a birth certificate and so does another. It's either willfully deceptive or incredibly simplistic, or there's a third option, which is that she was being Dobbsian about this. Like Lou Dobbs, she just tailors whatever she says to whatever interview she's facing, and in this case, Rusty Humphries recorded a CD called Bomb Iraq, so I guess, she was fitting in with that line of thinking.
But as part of the larger pattern that she just does not think?
Yes, well, look, there is something going on in there, and I think it's incredibly simplistic. And look, the cleanup job is in many ways more revealing than the interview itself. This notion that that anything goes. It's just either a case that I didn't say what you heard me saying, or I'm going to imagine something different. That's exactly what the people who worked with her in the campaign have been saying about her. There is an alternative world that she experiences that is either nothing she lives or other people lives at the time, or is just recreated out of whole cloth later on.
And speaking of cleanup, by trying to deny she'd ever said it in that Facebook post titled Stupid Conspiracies, Governor Palin prompted a lot of angry reaction on her Facebook page from supporters outraged that she had tried to backtrack. Could this end up hurting her with them?
live by the mob, die by the mob. It's very hard to try and control those populist tendencies. In the end, Sarah Palin, if she does have political ambition, knows that she cannot take the birthing questions very far. That's why so much of this is couched in this sort of polite terms of a question. Do you think it's fair game to raise these things? She obviously knows that if she's going to be seriously considered on a national stage, she has to dial that back. But you cannot please the populist crowd by trying to dial things back, and that's exactly where Lou Dobbs has run himself into problems as well.
We've all seen President Obama's birth certificate by now, the announcement so many years ago that was issued in the Hollywood newspapers that went along with that. And the Obama campaign, of course, released this birth certificate. But have we ever seen Sarah Palin's birth certificate? I mean, if you want to follow her logic, couldn't she be a citizen of Russia for all we know?
You know, that is a very interesting point of view. I hadn't considered the similarities between Putin and Palin. Now that you mention it, when she said that she was keeping an eye on Russia, she may have just been keeping an eye on herself.
And then finally, Richard, how much damage does this do to those who still see Sarah Palin as their savior in 2012?
The more she gets out and has to face these kinds of problems of her own making, the more she's going to be exposed to the kinds of questions about, can she be a credible candidate? Is she going to represent the party in the way it wants to be represented? And I think there's a reason why the handlers in the McCain campaign were so terrified about putting her out there unvarnished. This is her moment. Let's see what she's made of. I suspect that at this rate she's not going to make 2010 over mind 2012.
Richard Wolff of MSNBC, author of Renegade. Richard, I agree with you. And also with Public Strategies. Thanks as always, Richard. We appreciate it.
Thank you, David.